The gavel's sharp rap, a gunshot in the courtroom's sterile hush, was meant to signify order and resolution. Yet, in the vast wood-paneled chamber, the sound lingered, heralding the ensuing pandemonium. My heart thrummed a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a counterpoint to the measured, almost dispassionate tone of the Honorable Judge Eleanor Fletcher. The court recognizes the petitioner, Mr. Alexander Sterling, for his final statement prior to the division of marital assets. Alex rose, embodying tailored elegance intertwined with wounded pride. His charcoal brioni suit, a gift from our second anniversary, fit impeccably. He adjusted his sapphire cufflinks, also mine, and offered the judge a small, pained smile, the kind that conveyed reluctant duty. "Thank you, Your Honor." His voice, that once comforting, resonant baritone, filled the room. He turned slightly, not to face me directly, but to engage the assembled gallery. "This is, as you can imagine, the most difficult day of my life. Harper is a complex woman. Our marriage had its challenges." I remained motionless at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped on the cool wood. Rachel Goldstein, my lawyer, a sharp-featured brunette with discerning eyes, rested a reassuring hand near my elbow. Her touch conveyed, "Not yet." "However," Alex continued, his tone hardening, shedding its feigned sorrow like molted skin, "we must address the practicalities, the facts, however unpleasant." He held up a document as if it were scripture. "The prenuptial agreement, freely entered into by both parties, is unequivocal. Upon dissolution of the marriage after 3 years, all assets acquired during the marriage are subject to equitable distribution under New York law." He paused, allowing the legal weight of his words to settle. Then, he turned. At last his icy blue eyes met mine. The pain was gone, replaced by a cold, glittering triumph. "And what substantial assets we have accumulated, Your Honor." He began a slow promenade before the bench, like a professor relishing a crucial point. "The primary residence on East 76th Street, purchased during our union, the Hamptons Beach House, which my wife inherited but which, through considerable joint investment and renovation, has dramatically increased in value. The appreciation on her art collection, pieces by Hockney, O'Keeffe, and a nascent Basquiat, all meticulously curated and managed during our marriage. The significant growth of her gallery, the Howard Eye, which benefited immeasurably from my client network and financial acumen." With each item enumerated, a piece of my spirit turned to ice. He painted a picture of shared endeavor, of marital partnership, transforming my life's work and my family's legacy into a joint venture he had masterminded. "Your Honor," Alex declared, gesturing with hands spread in a semblance of magnanimity, "I am not an unreasonable man. I do not wish to leave Ms. Harper destitute. I am merely seeking what the law and our own agreement entitle me to, a fair share, which, after exhaustive analysis by my forensic accountants—" He ceased his pacing, his gaze fixed on me, the mask of the aggrieved husband completely discarded. A smile graced his lips, not the charming, boyish grin I'd once adored, but something sharp, predatory, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the smile of a player who has already secured victory and awaits their opponent's recognition of defeat. His voice lowered, yet in the profound silence of the courtroom it resonated like a proclamation. "Your millions, Harper," he stated, the familiar use of my name a profound violation. "Every painting, every property, every dime of that trust fund your daddy left you, I'm taking more than half. I'm taking what is rightfully mine." Then, he laughed. It wasn't a genteel chuckle, but a full-throated, unrestrained roar of conquest. It ricocheted off the oak paneling, startling the stenographer, causing the bailiff to stiffen. The few reporters present instinctively leaned forward, pens poised. The courtroom erupted in a wave of hushed astonishment. Rachel muttered a sharp, "You son of a bitch," under her breath. I noted Judge Fletcher's brows ascend toward her hairline, her lips thinning in evident disapproval of the spectacle. But Alex remained oblivious. He had won. In his mind, the game was concluded. He had embodied the loving partner, the astute husband, and now, the victorious litigant. He had executed his script flawlessly, and I, mine. The ensuing chaos was my cue. His laughter, my curtain rise. I drew a slow, deep breath, the air chilling my lungs. Reaching into the slim leather portfolio on the table, my fingers, now steady, closed not around a legal document, but around a simple, cream-colored envelope. It was substantial, weighty with truth. I stood. My knees held firm. My voice, when it emerged, was clear and composed, slicing through the clamor like a surgeon's instrument. Your Honor. Judge Fletcher, her frown still fixed on Alex's theatrics, shifted her gaze to me. Mrs. Sterling Howard, do you wish to add something? I do. I approached the bench. The eyes of the room followed, an almost palpable pressure against my back. I extended the envelope. If it please the court, before you render a decision on the fair share my husband believes he is entitled to, I ask that you examine this document closely. I laid the envelope on the polished wood before her. For a beat, she simply regarded it. Then me. Her shrewd, experienced gray eyes assessed my face. I met her gaze, allowing her to perceive the stillness, the absence of panic. I was not a distraught wife. I was the presenter of evidence. With a slight sigh, as if indulging a final desperate plea, she took the envelope. She slid a single manicured finger under the flap and opened it. She withdrew the contents, not a stack of legal briefs, but a few photographs and a single typed page. She glanced at the first photograph, a faint furrow appearing. She read the heading of the page. Her eyes flickered to Alex, who was still savoring his moment, adjusting his tie with a self-satisfied air. Then she read on. Her frown deepened, lines etching themselves onto her forehead. She examined the second photograph, then returned her attention to the page. Slowly, she raised her head. She stared at Alexander Sterling, my husband, the formidable attorney, the game's master strategist, and Judge Eleanor Fletcher, a respected figure in New York family law, a woman not considered given to lightness, did something remarkable. She laughed. It began as a choked sound, a disbelieving expulsion of air, then swelled into a genuine, shoulder-shaking guffaw that filled the stunned courtroom. She laughed until tears pricked the corners of her eyes, the crisp document in her hand trembling. Alex's triumphant smirk faltered, then shattered, vanishing from his face. Confusion, followed by the first icy tremor of apprehension, replaced it. The room, previously abuzz, lapsed into a silence so profound one could distinguish the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Your Honor? Alex's voice was strained, all mirth extinguished. Is there an issue? Judge Fletcher finally subdued her mirth, though a smile still played on her lips. She held up the typed page, her eyes gleaming with an expression that closely resembled admiration for me. Oh, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice laden with amusement, I do believe there is. It seems your wife has just redefined the term, discovery. 6 months prior, the champagne flute felt cool and delicate in my grasp. From the rooftop terrace of the Sterling Shaw law firm, Manhattan sprawled below, a glittering expanse of spilled jewels. The air was warm, imbued with the mingled scents of expensive perfume, ambition, and the Hudson River by night. To Harper Lynn Howard, Alex's voice, warm and intimate, murmured beside my ear. His arm was a firm anchor around my waist. The most captivating gallery owner in New York, and tonight, the most beautiful woman in this city, which, I might add, is no small accomplishment. I leaned into him, smiling up at the sharp, handsome contours of his profile. You're prejudiced, Mr. Sterling. Blindly, passionately prejudiced, he agreed, gently clinking his glass against mine, and I intend to remain so. This was our 6-month anniversary dinner, not of our marriage, but of the night we met. He had remembered. Of course he had. Alexander Sterling remembered everything. It was one of the qualities that made him the most sought-after divorce attorney on the Upper East Side. That, and a ruthlessness he never turned towards me. To me, he was all attentive charm, a bastion of unwavering support. We had first encountered each other at the opening of my gallery, the Howard Eye, on a rain-swept Thursday in September. He had arrived with a client, he mentioned, but had been instantly captivated by a small, evocative landscape from an as-yet undiscovered Appalachian artist. He had purchased it immediately. Following that, he had treated me to a drink. 2 weeks later, he took me to Le Bernardin. A month after that, he whisked us away to Paris for a weekend, simply because I had expressed a desire to experience the Louvre at dusk. He represented everything my life had lacked since the car accident that claimed my parents 3 years prior. He was steadfast, present, and fiercely protective. He filled the quiet, spacious rooms of the inherited townhouse. He made the burden of the legacy, the art, the wealth, the constant low-grade anxiety of sole responsibility feel lighter, shared. "Penny for your thoughts?" he inquired, nuzzling my temple. "Just contemplating my immense fortune," I replied, and in that moment I meant it with my entire being. "The luck is entirely mine, my love." He turned me to face him, his expression shifting to one of seriousness, almost solemnity. "Harper, these past 6 months have revealed to me what I've been missing: a partner, an equal, a future." He took a deliberate breath, reaching into his tuxedo pocket. My own breath caught, a foolish, hopeful flutter in my chest, but it wasn't a ring box. It was a slim, legal-sized envelope. My heart settled, a brief, insignificant disappointment quickly suppressed. "I know this isn't the most romantic gesture," he said, his thumb caressing the paper. "But to me, it's equally vital. It's about safeguarding what we're building, before the world, my clients, anyone else, has a stake in it." "What is it, Alex?" "A prenuptial agreement," he stated softly. He maintained eye contact, his blue gaze holding mine with an intensity that felt like genuine sincerity. "Before you respond, allow me to explain. I've witnessed it all, Harper, in my profession. I've seen love devolve into the most acrimonious disputes. I've seen individuals who vowed eternal devotion attempt to dismantle each other over trivialities and considerable assets." He took my free hand, his grip warm and firm. "I never want that to be our fate. This," he tapped the envelope, "is not a contingency for failure. It's a testament to our love. It's us, in this moment of clarity and profound affection, declaring that regardless of future circumstances, we shall never weaponize the very things we cherish about each other. It removes the financial element entirely, permanently, so it can never, under any circumstances, harm us." The logic was impeccable. It was mature. It was the action of a responsible, clear-minded adult. It was also precisely what my closest friend, Chloe, a criminal defense attorney whose cynicism was forged in the Brooklyn courtrooms, had cautioned me about over margaritas the week prior. "A divorce lawyer asking for a prenup, Harper," she'd said. "That's akin to a fox offering to design the henhouse security system. Just promise me you'll have your own lawyer review it, not one of his golf buddies, someone formidable who represents only you." I had dismissed it with a laugh. Chloe perceived conspiracies in minor infractions. Alex was not like that. "Who drafted it?" I inquired, my voice softer. Martin Shaw, he replied, naming his senior partner. The best. But Harper, I want you to feel at ease. Take it to whoever you wish. Your male colleague, your female colleague, your entire firm. I have nothing to conceal. My sole desire is for our mutual protection, for both of us. He emphasized those last two words. My assets, your legacy. This arrangement keeps them distinct, sacred. It's a pledge that my interest lies not in those possessions, but in you. He presented it as a protective shield, a solemn promise. How could I possibly object to such a vow? I accepted the envelope. Okay. His smile radiated warmth as if the sun had just emerged. He kissed me, a deep, tender embrace, right there against the luminous backdrop of the city skyline. Thank you. He breathed against my lips. You cannot fathom what this signifies to me. He grinned, the serious moment having passed. Nell, he said, and this time, the ring box did indeed materialize. An emerald cut, 5 carats, flawless, for Alexander Sterling never did anything by halves. 3 weeks later, the offices of Feynman Gross exuded an atmosphere of muted earth tones and intimidating quiet. My father's long-standing attorney, Leonard Gross, scrutinized the prenuptial agreement over his half-moon spectacles. He had overseen my parents' estate, a man who spoke in precise clauses and whose allegiance was to their memory, and, by extension, to me. Harper, he said, setting the document down with a soft exhalation. It's comprehensive, but... I prompted. A low thrum of anxiety had accompanied me since entrusting it to him, but the agreement was drafted from a decidedly singular viewpoint, Sterling's. Leonard leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. The standard provisions are acceptable. What you bring into the marriage, you retain. What he brings in, he retains. The complexity arises in the definitions, and in what is termed, let's say, the marital effort clause. What does that signify? It means, he said, picking up the agreement and indicating a densely worded paragraph, that it broadly defines marital assets. Anything acquired or significantly increased in value during the marriage is potentially subject to division, and it attributes that enhancement to a joint effort, whether direct or indirect. He looked at me. If your gallery's value increases because of a show you've curated, it could be argued that he provided emotional support, thus contributing. If the Hamptons house appreciates due to a booming real estate market, he might claim his advice on renovation contractors was the indirect cause. That Basquiat sketch you acquired at auction, if its value skyrockets, and you two discussed it over dinner, that constitutes a joint effort. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. That seems rather vague. It's intentionally vague? It's a loophole large enough to drive a truckload of subpoenas through. He removed his glasses. Harper, I must inquire. Are you certain about this man? This is the kind of agreement one prepares when anticipating conflict, not a lifetime commitment. He's a divorce lawyer. Or, Leonard said gently, he's meticulously orchestrating the battlefield in advance, ensuring he occupies the most advantageous position. I departed his office with a pervasive sense of unease. That evening, during dinner at our favored West Village bistro, I decided to broach the subject. Alex, I began. Leonard expressed some reservations regarding the phrasing in the prenup, specifically the joint effort stipulation. Alex's smile was patient and understanding. He reached across the table, taking my hand. Harper, my love, Leonard is an estate attorney, a competent one, certainly, but he deals with wills and trusts, where everyone involved is, truthfully, deceased and beyond the point of contention. I, on the other hand, navigate the dynamic, complex, and indeed messy reality of divorce. He made Leonard sound anachronistic, excessively wary. He made my concern sound naive. I simply wish to be assured, and you should be as well, he said, his thumb stroking my knuckles. Tell you what, we'll add a codicil, a straightforward amendment. We'll establish a limit. Let's say, any asset that appreciates in value by more than 20% due to direct, tangible, documented effort by the other spouse. That's more than equitable. I'll have Martin draft it tomorrow. He was yielding. He was listening. He was rectifying the situation. The relief that washed over me was both sweet and potent. See? I reassured myself. He's not the antagonist Chloe and Leonard are portraying him to be. He's merely cautious. He loves me. A week later, I signed the amended agreement in Martin Shaw's lavish office, with Alex beaming beside me. I had foregone legal counsel. Alex had indicated it wasn't necessary for a minor amendment, and I had wanted to demonstrate my trust, a gesture of faith. As my elegant, looping signature graced the line, Alex kissed my cheek. "My practical, perfect future wife," he murmured. I should have detected the icy undertone in the word practical, but all I felt was warmth. Present day. The echo of Judge Fletcher's laughter had dissipated, replaced by a tense, charged silence. All gazes were fixed on Alex. The color had leached from his face, leaving only 2 angry crimson patches high on his cheeks. His formerly confident, expansive posture had vanished. He was coiled tightly, like a spring on the verge of detonation. "Your Honor, I must object to this. This theatrics," he stammered, finally regaining his voice. His tone was entirely wrong, indignant, arrogant. It was the tone of a man whose script had just been irrevocably altered, and he was furious at the prompter. "Theatrics, Mr. Sterling." Judge Fletcher's amusement had vanished, replaced by a chilling composure. She held up the typewritten page. "This appears to be a rather detailed notarized affidavit from a Mr. Samuel Rossi, a licensed private investigator, dated over the past 4 months. She picked up one of the photographs. It was a black and white telephoto image, grainy but clear. It depicted Alex in a restaurant booth, leaning intimately across the table towards a beautiful blonde woman. His hand rested on hers. The date stamp in the corner indicated a weekend he had claimed to be attending a settlement conference in Boston. "And this," she said, selecting another photograph, "is a rather clear image of you entering a residential building on East 65th Street. She paused. "The lease for which, according to the attached addendum, is held by a corporate entity entirely owned by your wife. Curious timing, as the lease commenced 8 months into your marriage." The murmur in the courtroom resumed, now amplified, tinged with a different emotion, not shock, but scandalized delight. The reporters were scribbling furiously. Alex's attorney, a sleek shark of a man named Covington, rose to his feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous character assassination, completely irrelevant to the equitable distribution of assets. The infidelity clause in the prenuptial agreement is standard. It does not invalidate." "I'm not discussing the infidelity clause, Mr. Covington," Judge Fletcher interrupted, her voice sharp as a whip crack. She lifted the final item from the envelope. It was a photocopy of a page, covered in dense, single-spaced type. "I'm discussing this." She adjusted her glasses. "It appears, Mr. Sterling, that your wife's investigator has conducted some research into your previous cases and those of your associates. A pattern is emerging. 5 high-net-worth divorces in the past 7 years where you represented the financially weaker spouse, invariably the husband. Curiously, secured settlements ranging from 30 to 60% of marital assets, which in each instance included significant inheritances or premarital property brought into the marriage by the wife. In 3 of those cases, the wives are now in bankruptcy proceedings." She looked up. "A remarkable coincidence, or a business model?" Alex's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The triumph in his eyes had curdled into something akin to terror. Judge Fletcher wasn't finished. "But this," She tapped the photocopied page. This is what I find particularly compelling. I held his gaze for a count of 3 heartbeats, my expression as unreadable as the surface of a still lake. No smile, no smirk, no triumph, just calm, quiet observation. Then I turned, gathered my portfolio, and followed Rachel toward the judge's chambers. The noise of the crumbling facade behind me was the sweetest silence I had ever heard. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. 6 months after the wedding, the first crack in the foundation wasn't a quake. It was a hairline fissure, thin and almost invisible, a slight give underfoot where solidity was expected. It happened on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. We were in the breakfast nook of our East 76th Street townhouse, my townhouse, though Alex had stopped using the possessive months ago. Sunlight streamed through the bay window, catching the dust motes dancing over the remains of our eggs Benedict. I was reviewing the catalog proofs for the upcoming Rothko-inspired group show, a cup of coffee growing cold beside me. Alex was scrolling through his tablet, the Wall Street Journal app reflected in his glasses. "This is good," he said, not looking up. His tone was casual, the kind of conversational murmur that often preceded a request to pass the marmalade. "The joint account, seeing everything in one place, flowing through. It makes sense." I looked up, the proof sheet in my hand momentarily forgotten. The joint account? I thought that was just for household expenses, the townhouse renovations, Mrs. Henderson's salary, the utilities. We'd opened it a month after the wedding on Alex's suggestion. A clean slate, he called it, a joint venture. I transferred a large sum, $100,000, as a sort of operating fund for the household. He added an equal amount. I felt mature, practical, as if a marriage of convenience were a marriage of the heart. Alex put the tablet down, finally meeting my gaze. His smile was warm, sensible. "That's what it's for, honey, but think about it. Why keep money idle in a dozen different places? Your Charles Schwab account, your parents' Fidelity fund, an operating account for a gallery, rental income from a house in the Hamptons. It's inefficient, a tax nightmare to manage." Marcus was just saying that the other day. "Marcus is an accountant," he said, "an elegant, humorless man with a weakness for spreadsheets and a distinct disdain for all that clutter." "Marcus thinks my finances are a nightmare," I asked, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "My father, a meticulous man who made his fortune in commercial real estate, ingrained fiscal responsibility into his income. My finances were orderly, if conservative." "No, of course not," Alex soothed, reaching across the table to cover mine. His skin was warm, his grip firm. "He just sees the big picture, the missed opportunities. With a little strategic consolidation, we could use leverage. The gas cylinders, not just storing them. Think of it like storing our wealth, like you do with your heart. You don't just buy a painting and put it in the closet. You put it on display. You care for it. You make it work for you. It's the same principle." The metaphor was intentional, crafted to get my attention. I felt the flicker of defensiveness subside, replaced by a vague sense of comfort. "I don't know, Alex. My father always said to keep things separate. Eggs, baskets, all that." "Your father was brilliant," Alex said, his voice slipping into the respectful, somber register he used whenever my parents were mentioned. "But it was a different time. Financial instruments, strategies, they've changed. The world has become more interconnected. Interdependence is a strength, not a weakness." He squeezed my hand. "I'm not saying we'll move everything tomorrow. Let's just move on to the next step. Transfer the Hamptons rental income into a joint account. Let Marcus and I set up a proper management structure for it. You won't have to think about anything. You can focus on your gallery, on finding the next Basquiat. Leave the boring calculations to us." It sounded so reasonable, so helpful. The rental income was substantial, around 20,000 rubles a month during peak season, but it also presented a constant administrative headache, dealing with the property manager, maintenance, and seasonal ownership changes. Alex offered to take some of the burden off my shoulders. You know, that's what partners do. I'd have to consult Leonard about the tax consequences of moving trust income, I stated, the words feeling hollow as they left my lips. A fleeting shadow, like a cloud obscuring the sun, crossed Alex's face. It vanished instantly, replaced by an expression of patient comprehension. Leonard's a competent lawyer, Harper, but his expertise lies in estate planning. His domain is probate and wills. This, however, is active wealth management. It's an entirely different matter. Nevertheless, by all means, speak with him. Have him reach out to Marcus. They can sort it out amongst themselves, the professionals. He reclined, releasing my hand. He exuded an air of relaxed self-assurance, placing no pressure, merely suggesting, I simply dislike seeing you preoccupied with administrative tasks when you possess such a remarkable discernment for art. It feels like a disservice to your talent. He knew precisely which point to emphasize. My gallery, my artistic eye, was my identity. The facet of myself I valued most, the part that felt most distinct from my inherited wealth. By presenting his financial acquisition as an act of liberating my artistic spirit, he made any hesitation seem like self-betrayal. The rift didn't heal, it was merely superficially mended for a time. 2 months later, I'm telling you, Harper, that man is a walking, talking warning sign. He's got more of them than a Soviet military parade. Chloe Bennett speared a piece of arugula with her fork, her dark eyes intense across the candlelit table at Buvette. We occupied our customary corner booth, a weekly haven for gossip, wine, and unsolicited, though often accurate, counsel. Chloe, with her incisive intellect and a wardrobe as dark as her sense of humor, was the antithesis of Alex's world of muted beiges and understated deceptions. Chloe, not this again. I sighed, swirling my Sancerre. He's merely trying to be helpful. The storage arrangement is perfectly logical. The humidity levels in the townhouse basement aren't optimal for works on paper. And that Klimt sketch, the one your grandmother acquired in Vienna in 1952 for a pittance, and is now valued at approximately the GDP of a small island nation. Yes, I'm aware, Chloe concluded. And now it's slated to reside in a secure, climate-controlled facility in New Jersey, which, coincidentally, is owned by a holding company your husband's law firm utilizes for discovery document storage. How convenient. I placed my glass down with slightly too much force. How could you possibly know that? Because I'm a suspicious individual who does her research, she replied, her tone not unkind. She reached into her sizable leather tote, retrieved a slender manila folder and slid it across the table. And because I care about you and I'm concerned. I regarded the folder as if it were a venomous serpent. What is it? Public records. Not extensive. He's meticulous, but his firm, Sterling and Shaw, they have a specialization. It's not just high net worth divorces. It's a very particular type of high net worth divorce. She leaned forward, her voice lowering. They represent the financially disadvantaged spouse, almost exclusively, and they achieve remarkable success. Their average settlement is 42% above standard equitable distribution guidelines in contested cases. They boast a 90% success rate in reclassifying premarital assets as marital. That's not chance, Harper. That's a system. A chill traced its way down my spine, but I dismissed it. So he's proficient at his job. That's what I rely on him for. I mean, not that I pay him, but you grasp my meaning. He's a shark. I understood that when I married him. Did you? Chloe's gaze was unyielding. Did you realize that in the past 5 years he's represented 4 husbands whose wives possessed substantial inherited wealth? And in each of those instances, the wives received less than 40% of the marital assets, despite their prenuptial agreements. One of them, Isabella Vandergroot, you might recall her from the Guggenheim board. She's practically penniless, residing in a condominium in White Plains. Her husband, Alex's client, retained the Sagaponack estate, the Paris apartment, and a 7-figure alimony settlement. Isabella Vandergroot had a significant gambling problem, I stated automatically, echoing Alex's dismissive remark from a charity gala. She squandered millions at the Bellagio. It wasn't the divorce that broke her. Did she? Chloe asked softly. Or is that just the story filed with the court? A story substantiated by, let me check my notes. Oh yes, a private investigator's report and a psychological evaluation commissioned by Sterling and Shaw. A chill spread, a cold pool in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying your husband doesn't just play the game, Harper. He designs the board, manufactures the pieces, and writes the rules. And he always wins. She tapped the folder. Just be careful with the storage, with the accounts, with everything. Keep something for yourself. A line of credit he doesn't know about. A safety deposit box. Something. I pushed the folder back toward her, my appetite gone. I appreciate the concern, Chloe, really. But this is my husband. He loves me. He's not scheming to take my grandmother's Klimt. Chloe looked at me for a long moment, her expression a mixture of frustration and profound sadness. She finally picked up the folder and put it back in her bag. Okay, but promise me one thing. The next time he suggests moving an asset or signing a paper or consolidating for efficiency, you call me first or call Leonard. Just call someone who isn't on his payroll. I promise, I said, and in that moment, I meant it. I broke the promise 3 weeks later. It was the anniversary of my parents' death, a leaden, gray day that matched the hollow ache in my chest. Alex had cleared his schedule, a rare feat. He'd set up a small, tasteful memorial in the living room. Their wedding photo, a vase of my mother's favorite lilies, a bottle of my father's prized Macallan 25 with 2 glasses. He'd been perfect, quietly supportive, holding me when I cried, listening as I rambled about fragmented memories. He'd made all the right sounds, asked all the right questions. He felt like a port in the storm of my grief. In the late afternoon, as the gray light faded, he said, "You know, I was thinking, all this, the townhouse, the Hamptons place, the art, it's not just assets, Harper. It's their legacy. It's them. The weight of that, of being the steward, it's a lot for one person to carry." I nodded, mute, curled into the corner of the sofa, clutching a cashmere throw. I was looking at the estate documents Leonard drew up, he continued, his voice gentle, musing. It's a classic trust structure, solid, protective, but it's passive. It's like putting their favorite things in a museum vault, safe, but stagnant. He moved to sit beside me, taking my hand. What if we could make it more? What if we could make their legacy grow, thrive, start a foundation in their name, fund arts education, something that would make them proud, that would outlive us? The vision he painted was beautiful, a phoenix rising from the ashes of my grief, a purpose. How? I whispered. We could restructure, he said, his eyes alight with sincere, earnest passion. Move the core assets, the real estate, the blue-chip art, the stock portfolio into a family limited partnership, an FLP. It's cleaner, more flexible. It would give us more control to direct the assets toward meaningful causes. We could even get significant tax advantages, which would mean more money for the foundation's work. He brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. I've already talked to Marcus about it. He's drawn up some preliminary papers. Nothing to sign, not yet. Just to look at, to see the possibility. He reached for a sleek leather portfolio on the side table, the one that usually held his legal briefs. From it, he extracted a thinner sheaf of papers. The top page had Howard Family Legacy Partnership Preliminary Structure in elegant letterhead. My eyes swam with unshed tears. I could barely focus on the words. It was a blur of legalese, of percentages and clauses. It looked official. It looked caring. I can't think about this right now, Alex, I said, my voice thick. Of course not, he said instantly, putting the papers aside and pulling me into a hug. Of course not, my love. There's no rush. It's just an idea. Something to think about for the future. A way to channel the love and the loss into something beautiful. He kissed the top of my head. I just want to help you carry it. That's all. Let me help you carry it. In that moment of profound vulnerability, his offer felt like salvation, not a threat, but a lifeline. The fissure wasn't just painted over. It was filled with gold, made to look like a deliberate, beautiful feature of the design. I didn't call Chloe. I didn't call Leonard. I signed the papers a month later. After a few minor revisions, Alex suggested to streamline things. I signed them in Marcus's office, with Alex's hand on my shoulder, a comforting, solid weight. The FLP was established. My parents' legacy, the bedrock of my life, was transferred into a new entity. Alexander Sterling was named managing partner. The hairline crack becomes a fissure. The first time I felt a true, unignorable jolt of fear was because of a password. Alex had a home office on the 3rd floor, a sanctum of dark wood and leather. He was usually meticulous about locking it, but one Sunday morning, he'd rushed out for an emergency meeting with a client, a basketball star whose prenup was under attack. He'd said and had left the door ajar. I was bringing up a fresh cup of coffee he'd forgotten, pushing the door open with my hip. I placed the mug on a coaster on his immaculate desk. My eyes fell on his computer monitor. It was asleep, but not off. A screensaver of a serene mountain lake drifted across the screen, and then I saw it. A yellow post-it note stuck to the base of the monitor. In Alex's neat, all-caps handwriting was a single word: Veritas, Latin for truth. It was so melodramatic, so him. It was also, I knew, the password to his encrypted work drive. He'd muttered it once, frustrated on a call with IT, while I was in the room. I shouldn't have. Every cell in my body knew I shouldn't. But Chloe's words, the manila folder, the cold, pooling unease that had never fully dissipated since the FLP signing, it all coalesced into a single, irresistible impulse. I sat in his high-backed chair. It was still warm from him. I jiggled the mouse. The mountain lake vanished, replaced by a login screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This is a violation. This is paranoid. This is what Chloe warned you about becoming. I typed Veritas. The screen unlocked with a soft chime, revealing a meticulously organized desktop. Folders labeled by client name, by case number. Nothing unusual. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked on the File Explorer, navigated to the D drive, his secure encrypted partition. There was a folder there, not labeled with a client name. It was simply called A1. My breath caught. My own initials. Harper Lynn Howard. H. LHA1. I double-clicked. It asked for another password. I stared at the blinking cursor. What would he use? Not Veritas again. Something personal. His mother's maiden name. The name of his first dog. I tried a few. Nothing. Then, on a whim, I typed birthday, 10/19. The folder opened. It wasn't full of financial documents or scheming plans. It was a subfolder labeled Due Diligence. Inside were dozens of PDFs, scanned articles, property records. I clicked one open. It was a New York Times article from 6 years ago. Heiress and art world scion Howard Parrish in tragic accident. Another was the full probate filing for my parents' estate, listing every asset, every holding, every valuation. There were tax returns for the gallery going back 5 years, deeds to the townhouse, to the Hamptons property, appraisal reports for every major piece in the collection. Some I'd commissioned, others I'd never seen. It was a dossier, a comprehensive, chillingly thorough dossier on me and everything I owned. And the date stamp on the earliest files was from over a year before we'd met. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. Due diligence, the term they used in mergers and acquisitions, in hostile takeovers. I heard the front door open 2 floors down. A muffled call. "Harper? You upstairs?" Panic, sharp and acidic, shot through me. I fumbled with the mouse, closing the folder, clicking the drive to close. I stood up so fast the chair wheeled back and hit the bookcase with a thud. Alex appeared in the doorway, his coat still on. His eyes went from my pale face to the computer screen now back on the screensaver, to the chair askew. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice pleasant, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room like a forensic scene. I brought you your coffee. You forgot it," I said, gesturing to the mug, a pathetic piece of evidence. My voice sounded thin, reedy. He looked at the mug, then back at me. His expression softened into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's sweet of you, darling. You didn't have to." He walked in, shrugging off his coat. He glanced at the monitor. The serene lake was still drifting. Get bored? Thinking of taking up law? The joke fell flat. No, I just sat for a second. My feet were tired. The lie was transparent. He came around the desk, not towards the computer, but towards me. He put his hands on my shoulders. They were heavy. "This room is a mess of client confidentiality, Harper. Super sensitive stuff. I'd hate for you to accidentally see something you shouldn't. Some of these cases, they're ugly. I'd try to keep that ugliness away from you." He leaned in and kissed my forehead. "Let's keep this our sanctuary, okay? My boring work cave. You have your beautiful gallery. We'll keep the world separate." It was a perfect performance. The protective husband shielding his delicate wife from the harsh realities of his profession. The narrative was so seamless, so plausible, that for a terrifying moment I believed it. The dossier. The due diligence. Maybe it was just him being thorough before we got serious. A lawyer's caution. He'd seen gold diggers before. Perhaps he was just making sure I wasn't one. The seed of doubt Chloe had planted was a hardy thing, though. It had taken root. As I murmured an apology and let him lead me out of the office, as I heard the distinct click of the lock engaging behind us, the cold fact remained. The date on those files. He had been researching me in depth before he'd ever asked for my number, before the gallery opening, before the first date. Veritas. Truth. The truth was in that folder. And the truth was, I was now too afraid to look any deeper. 2 weeks after the discovery, the due diligence folder sat in the back of my mind like a tumor, malignant and silent. I told myself I'd imagined the date stamps. I'd been upset. My eyes had blurred. Veritas was a common password. The files. Maybe Alex, being a meticulous lawyer, had done the standard background check when things got serious. It was unromantic, but not criminal. Wasn't that what people in his world did? I'd heard stories of pre-date due diligence on heiresses. It was gauche, but it happened. I wrapped myself in these flimsy rationalizations like a blanket against a growing chill. Then, the universe, in a cruel twist of irony, offered a distraction so potent, so all-consuming, it momentarily burned away the fog of suspicion. I was late, not just fashionably late, biologically, fundamentally late. The kind of lateness that sent a jolt of pure electric panic through a woman who'd been told, after a bout of severe ovarian cysts in her 20s, that conception might be challenging. I bought the test at a Duane Reade in the West Village, far from our usual haunts, wearing oversized sunglasses like a fugitive. I took it in the sterile, fluorescent glare of a hotel bathroom, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The 2 pink lines appeared instantly, bold and unequivocal. I slid down the tiled wall onto the cold floor, the plastic stick clutched in my trembling hand. A sob caught in my throat, but it wasn't one of pure joy. It was a tumultuous whirlwind of terror, wonder, and a desperate, clawing hope. A baby, a family, a tiny, screaming, miraculous fact that had nothing to do with trusts or FLPs or due diligence folders. It was a new story. Our story. That night, I told him. I'd planned a dinner, a subtle reveal. But the moment he walked through the door, shrugging off his coat with a weary sigh, the words tumbled out of me, raw and unvarnished. "Alex, I'm pregnant." He stopped. The briefcase slipped from his fingers and thudded softly onto the Persian rug. For a long, suspended moment, he just stared at me, his face an unreadable blank. Then, a transformation. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, flooding him with a light so brilliant and warm it was almost blinding. A smile broke across his face, the most genuine, unguarded expression I'd seen from him in months. He crossed the room in 2 strides, swept me up in his arms and spun me around, whooping with a joy so loud and unfettered it shook the crystals in the chandelier. "Harper. My God. A baby. Our baby." He kissed me, laughing, crying, his hands cradling my face. This is everything. This changes everything." And for a while, it truly seemed to. The Alex who reemerged in the following weeks was the man I'd fallen in love with. Attentive, present, tender. He read pregnancy books aloud in bed. He banned soft cheeses and sushi from the house. He installed nightlights to guide my way to the bathroom. He talked to my barely there bump, his voice soft with awe, about baseball games and art museums and teaching it how to spot a fake Pollock from 20 paces. The shadow of the dossier receded. The pressure to discuss finances, to streamline, evaporated. He was too busy assembling cribs and debating the merits of Montessori versus Waldorf. The FLP paperwork, which had been sitting on his desk awaiting some final signatures, was filed away, forgotten. Our world contracted to the intimate, primal sphere of impending parenthood. I bloomed, wrapped in a cocoon of his attention and my own burgeoning hope. Maybe Chloe was wrong. Maybe the stress, the grief, the pressure of the inheritance had made me paranoid. This was real. The life kicking inside me was real. My small circle of friends celebrated with me. Chloe, ever the skeptic, hugged me tightly, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Just take care of yourself, okay?" she whispered fiercely. "Eat the damn sushi if you want it." But even her vigilance seemed to soften in the face of my palpable, giddy joy. My only other confidant outside of Chloe was Michael Rossi, my accountant. Bald, paunchy, and possessing the perpetually weary air of a man who'd seen too many zeros do stupid things. Michael had been my father's numbers man and had reluctantly, and with much grumbling, taken me on. He was the antithesis of Alex's sleek, predatory Marcos. I saw him for our quarterly review, my stomach just beginning to round under a loose silk blouse. He peered at the spreadsheets, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. "The gallery's doing well, Harper. Better than well. That Rothko-adjacent show was a home run. You've got a good eye." He grunted, which for Michael was a standing ovation. Then he turned a page and his bushy eyebrows descended. "What's this?" "Howard Family Legacy Partnership." "It's something Alex and I set up," I said, unable to keep a note of defensive pride out of my voice. For the baby. To manage the inheritance more proactively. For a foundation. Eventually. Michael scanned the document, his lips moving silently as he read. The frown deepened, carving trenches in his forehead. He took off his glasses and polished them slowly on his tie. "Harper," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Who set this up?" "Marcus, Alex's guy. He's a whiz with this stuff." "Alex says, I'm sure he is," Michael said dryly. He tapped the paper. "This partnership, it consolidates the real estate, the investment portfolio, and the core of the art collection under a single managing entity. You and Alex are the partners, him with 51%, you with 49%. It's for control," I explained, parroting Alex's words, "so we can make decisions quickly for the foundation's work." "Uh-huh." Michael leaned back, lacing his fingers over his stomach. "And the managing partner, that's Alex, I presume, has sole authority to buy, sell, or encumber partnership assets without the consent of the other partner, provided it's for the stated charitable aims of the partnership, which are, let's see, the promotion of arts and education. That's about as specific as a puddle." Harper, a cold trickle, the first since the pregnancy, started down my spine. He wouldn't do anything without talking to me. "It's just legal language to make things efficient. Efficiency is one thing," Michael said, putting his glasses back on and fixing me with a steady gaze. "Giving someone the unilateral, legally binding right to sell your parents' house to fund a puppet show in Poughkeepsie is another. This is your legacy, kid, not his. Keep it separate. Keep it in your name. A trust for the baby." "Fine, but this," he shook his head. "This is a fancy box with your name on it and his hand on the lock." I left his office feeling unsettled. The warm glow of pregnancy momentarily dimmed. When I mentioned Michael's concerns to Alex that evening, his reaction was a masterpiece of controlled exasperation. "Michael is a brilliant accountant, sweetheart," he said, rubbing my feet as we sat on the sofa. "But he's from the old school. He thinks an abacus and a ledger book are the height of financial innovation. The FLP is a modern tool. It provides protection from lawsuits, from excessive taxation. If, God forbid, the gallery were sued, your personal assets, the townhouse, the art, would be shielded inside the partnership." "We're not just thinking about us anymore," Alex said, his hand moving to rest gently on my stomach. "We're thinking about this little one. We're building a fortress for our family, Harper. Not walls to keep us in, but walls to keep the wolves out." He made Michael sound like a fearful, backward-looking relic. He made the FLP sound like the ultimate act of parental love. The fortress analogy was potent. I wanted a fortress for my child. I let the matter drop. The slippery slope of the first trimester was a haze of fatigue and nausea. My sharpest tool, my critical mind, felt blunted, submerged under a hormonal sea. Alex, the doting protector, stepped in. "You shouldn't be stressing over bills, darling," he'd say, taking the gallery's accounts payable folder from my hands. "Let me handle it. You rest. You're building a human." He began handling more and more. The gallery's banking, once solely my domain, was slowly integrated into the household system for simplicity. He'd set up autopays, transfer funds. It was a relief at first. One less thing to think about. Then came the art, specifically the soutine. Chaim Soutine's Le Poulet, a raw, magnificent, and frankly grotesque painting of a plucked fowl, had been my father's first major art purchase. It was not pretty. It was visceral, unsettling, brilliant. It was also, as of a recent Christie's auction of a comparable piece, worth somewhere north of $4 million. It hung in our dining room, a conversation starter that frequently killed conversation. One evening, over a dinner I'd mostly pushed around my plate, Alex gazed at it thoughtfully. "You know," he said. With the baby coming, we should think about the environment. That painting, it's a masterpiece, of course, but it's also rather intense. Not really the nurturing energy we want for a nursery, is it? I looked at the soutine, at its tortured, glorious bird. It had never scared me. It had felt alive. The nursery will be upstairs, Alex. It won't even see it. It's about the vibes, sweetheart, the energy of the home. He reached over and took my hand. And practically speaking, that money, tied up on the wall, we could put it to work for the baby. A 529 plan, maximally funded from birth, a trust that would guarantee college, a down payment on a first home. We could set this child up for life, tax-free, with just that one piece, sell the soutine. The idea felt like a betrayal. Daddy loved that painting. And he'd love his grandchild more, Alex said softly, relentlessly. He'd want that security for them. Art is beautiful, Harper, but it's not life. It's not a future. We have a chance to convert a challenging piece of beauty into absolute, unassailable security for our son or daughter. Isn't that what stewardship is all about? The argument was insidious. It wrapped a financial transaction in the sacred gauze of parental love and filial duty. It made holding on to the painting seem selfish, sentimental, irresponsible. I'd have to think about it, I whispered, my eyes stinging. Of course, he said, kissing my knuckles. No pressure. Just dream about it. Dream about what we could build for our little one with that kind of foundation. He didn't bring it up again, but he left a file on my nightstand. It was a glossy brochure for a legacy wealth trust from a top-tier firm. Inside, projected growth charts showed how $4 million invested at birth could become $38 million by the time our child was 40. The numbers were hypnotic. The soutine began to look less like a cherished heirloom and more like a dormant asset, selfishly hoarded. The fall of bleeding started on a Thursday morning, a sudden, shocking crimson stain against white cotton. The world narrowed to a pinhole of terror. The frantic cab ride to Dr. Evans' office, Alex's ashen face, his hand crushing mine, the cold ultrasound gel, the technician's face, carefully neutral, then softening with a pity that was a diagnosis in itself. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Sterling Howard. There's no cardiac activity." The words meant nothing. They were sounds. Then they were everything, a universe of loss contained in a single clinical sentence. The D&C was a blur of bright lights and muffled voices. The physical emptiness that followed was profound, a yawning, aching void. But it was nothing compared to the psychic desolation. The future I'd been knitting together, stitch by hopeful stitch, had been ripped away, leaving only frayed, useless threads. Alex was present. He made the arrangements. He fielded the calls. He brought me tea and toast I couldn't eat. He spoke in hushed, respectful tones. But the luminous, joyful man from the early weeks of pregnancy was gone, extinguished as completely as the tiny heartbeat. In his place was an efficient, somber caretaker. The fortress he'd been building, it seemed, had been for a future that no longer existed. The construction stopped. A week after the procedure, I was a ghost drifting through the too-quiet townhouse. I moved from room to room, touching things, a pillow, a book, the cool marble of the fireplace mantel, as if to reassure myself I still existed. In a daze, I gathered the clothes Alex had worn to the hospital, intending to take them to the dry cleaner. It was a meaningless task, a pebble to fill the abyss. As I lifted his suit jacket, something crackled in the breast pocket. A receipt. I pulled it out, my mind barely registering it. It was from the Lowell Hotel, dated for 2 days before my miscarriage, the day he'd told me he was at a settlement conference in Boston. The total was for a staggering amount: dinner for 2 with a bottle of Dom Perignon, a room for the night. The room was under the name A. Sterling. The name on the credit card was mine. I stood in the middle of our bedroom, the crisp paper trembling in my hand. The cold that had taken up residence in my bones since the hospital turned to a sharp, splintering ice. The pain of the loss was suddenly joined by another, older, more familiar ache. Betrayal. He hadn't been in Boston. He'd been at the Lowell, with my money, with someone else. The ghost inside me solidified into something hard and sharp. I didn't confront him. Not then. The grief was too raw, too all-consuming. Adding his infidelity to the mix felt like it would shatter what was left of me. Instead, I tucked the receipt into the back of my jewelry box, behind my grandmother's pearls, a piece of evidence waiting for a trial I wasn't ready to face. The days bled into weeks. Alex went back to work. The solicitous caretaker faded, replaced by a distant, impatient man. The financial conversations resumed, but the tone had changed. The velvet glove was off. "The soutine," he said one evening, not looking up from his tablet. "We need to move on it. The market is peaking. I've had Marcus run the numbers. The tax advantages of selling it through the FLP and funneling it into the charitable trust are significant. We're talking about saving nearly $1 million in capital gains." He spoke about my father's painting as if it were a stock option. There was no more talk of vibes or nurturing energy, no pretense of it being for a baby that was no longer there. I was curled in the window seat, staring out at the rain-washed street. "No." He looked up, his expression one of mild annoyance, as if I'd interrupted an important train of thought. "No, I'm not selling it. Not now. Not ever." My voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. He put the tablet down slowly. "Harper, be reasonable. We've been over this. It's a prudent move. Emotion has no place in asset management." "It's not an asset," I said, turning to look at him. "It's my father's painting. It's staying." A muscle ticked in his jaw. The charming, persuasive mask slipped, just for a second, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "This is exactly the sentimentality that destroys wealth. Your father wouldn't want you clinging to a piece of canvas when it could be securing your future." "My future?" I asked, the ice in my voice matching the ice in my veins. "Or yours?" The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Alex's eyes narrowed. The loving husband, the grieving would-be father, was gone. In his place was the lawyer, assessing an adversary. "What is that supposed to mean?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "It means I'm not selling the soutine. The matter is closed." He studied me for a long moment, then gave a short, dismissive shrug. "Fine, for now. But you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. We'll revisit it when you're thinking more clearly." He picked up his tablet again, a clear dismissal. It was the "we" that did it. The imperial, all-encompassing "we" that assumed my will was merely a temporary obstacle to his plans. The fissures in my marriage weren't just cracks anymore, they were canyons, and I was standing on the crumbling edge. A month later, the raw, screaming pain of the miscarriage had dulled to a constant, heavy ache. The numbness was wearing off, and in its place was a cold, clear-headed fury. I needed to know. The receipt in my jewelry box burned in my mind. I put on a simple black dress, the kind that wouldn't be remembered. I didn't call Chloe. This was something I had to do alone. I took a cab to the Lowell. The hotel bar was all dark wood, soft leather, and the discreet clink of crystal. It smelled of expensive whiskey and money. I took a seat at the end of the bar, ordered a club soda, and waited. I had no plan. I just needed to see the place, to make the betrayal real. And then I saw her. She was at a corner table, alone, nursing a martini. She was beautiful in a brittle, polished way, blonde hair in a severe bob, a diamond the size of a knuckle glittering on her left hand. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. She was staring into her drink. her expression one of profound, weary sadness. Our eyes met in the gilt-edged mirror behind the bar. For a second there was nothing. Then recognition flared in her eyes, followed by a flash of alarm, then a deep, unsettling pity. She knew me. Before I could look away, she was gathering her purse and standing. She walked towards the exit, then paused, as if wrestling with herself. She turned, her heels clicking on the parquet floor, and walked straight to me. "Harper Howard," she said. Her voice was husky, smoke-damaged. "Yes," I managed. She leaned in close. Up close, she was older than I'd first thought. Fine lines etched around her eyes and mouth. The diamond was gargantuan, obscene. "I'm Isabella," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Isabella Vander Groot." The name hit me like a physical blow. The Guggenheim board, the condo in White Plains, Chloe's folder. "I heard about your loss," she said. And for a terrifying moment I thought she meant the baby. Then her gaze flickered around the bar, taking in the rich surroundings, and I understood. She meant my innocence, my future. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, and the pity in her eyes was a living thing. "Get out. However you can. He doesn't love you. He only loves what you have, and he's very, very good at taking it." She pressed a crumpled cocktail napkin into my hand, then turned and was gone, disappearing into the plush gloom of the lobby. I looked down at the napkin. In a shaky, hurried script was a phone number and 3 words: "Call Samuel Rossi." My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the napkin. I fumbled for cash, left it on the bar, and stumbled out into the cool evening air. The city lights swam in my tear-blurred vision. I stood on the sidewalk, the napkin clutched in my fist like a lifeline. The receipt, the dossier, the FLP, the pressure to sell the soutine, the cold calculation in his eyes. It all clicked into place with a sickening final clarity. Chloe had been right. Leonard had been right. Michael had been right. Alex hadn't been building a fortress for our family. He'd been building a cage for me, and I'd been handing him the keys, one by one, wrapped in ribbons of trust and grief and love. I looked at the name on the napkin, Samuel Rossi. I didn't know who he was, but Isabella Vander Groot did. And the terror in her eyes, the pity in her voice, told me everything I needed to know. I took out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. The ghost inside me was gone. In its place was a woman with nothing left to lose, but everything she had. I dialed the number. Samuel Rossi's office carried the aroma of stale coffee, inexpensive pine cleaner, and aged paper. This cramped, closet-sized room above a bodega in Hell's Kitchen was a world apart from the opulent marble corridors of Sterling Shaw. Samuel himself was a hulking figure draped in a rumpled trench coat, his face a topographical map etched by a life of hardship, his eyes missing nothing. "Isabella sent you," he stated, not inquired, as I settled into the chair opposite his dented metal desk. "Means you're in deep with the Prince of Darkness himself, Sterling." I presented the Lowell receipt. He scanned it, grunted. "Amateur, billing it to your card. Arrogant." "I need to know," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "Everything." What he revealed over the next hour was not mere suspicion. It was a meticulously crafted blueprint. Photographs of Alex with various women surfaced. A socialite, the daughter of a hedge fund manager, and Isabella herself from years past. Bank records meticulously traced the flow of funds from divorce settlements to shell corporations. The most damning revelation was a consistent pattern. Alex systematically targeted women who were emotionally vulnerable and possessed significant, often inherited, wealth. The modus operandi was chillingly repetitive. A whirlwind romance would ensue, followed by Alex's insistence on a protective pre-nuptial agreement, subtly laced with hidden clauses. Assets would be gradually consolidated, culminating in a divorce initiated under pressure, with Alex leveraging the skewed agreement and a network of experts to claim a fortune. "He's a hunter," Samuel rasped, lighting a cigarette in defiance of the grimy no-smoking sign. "You're not his wife. You're his prey, and he's about to spring the trap." "The FLP," I whispered, the fragmented pieces clicking into place with a sickening finality. "The final receptacle." Samuel nodded. "Once your assets are placed within it, with him as managing partner, he no longer requires a divorce. He can bleed it dry at his leisure or liquidate it entirely for the partnership's benefit. Your signature on those partnership amendments he's pushing? That's you handing him the keys to the vault and agreeing that the lock was always his." A cold, sharp fury, more potent than grief, settled deep within me. "What do I do?" "You fight," Samuel stated, "but you fight dirty because he controls the clean battlefield. We gather evidence. We turn his own game against him." With Samuel and Chloe as my strategic leads, I plunged into warfare. Chloe connected me with Rachel Goldstein, a divorce attorney renowned for her ruthless tactics. "We don't play by his rules," Rachel declared, her gaze sharp and piercing. "We rewrite the game." I transformed into a phantom within my own home. I surreptitiously copied files from Alex's study while he slept, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Samuel installed a keystroke logger on his computer. I wore a pendant, a gift from Chloe, which concealed a voice-activated recorder. The evidence mounted. Emails between Alex and Marcus discussing the most effective stress points to apply post-miscarriage. Invoices from a private psychologist, Dr. Eris Thorne, detailing evaluations of past targets, diagnosing them with histrionic traits and financial impulsivity to undermine their legal standing. And the ultimate prize, documents linking Alex to Asterion Holdings LLC, a Delaware-based shell corporation. Funds from his previous settlements flowed in and out through a handful of individuals, including an art appraiser named Felix Durant and Dr. Thorne. He was operating a sophisticated machine, and I was merely the raw material on its conveyor belt. The pressure at home escalated. Alex's veneer of charm evaporated, replaced by a cold, impatient urgency. "The Bermuda paperwork. Harper, it's merely administrative. Sign it so we can actually relax on the beach." The stack of documents lay on his desk, a silent, menacing presence. I feigned brokenness, succumbing to grief. It wasn't a difficult pretense. The performance masked a deeply ingrained, focused terror. I would nod, offer murmured assent, and stall. "Tomorrow, Alex, I have a headache." Samuel had warned that the Bermuda trip was a classic tactic. Isolation, sun, sand, and relentless pressure. "You'll sign anything to maintain peace. Refusing would trigger suspicion." I had to tread a dangerous line. The night before our scheduled departure, desperation reached its zenith. Alex was attending a late client dinner. I was in his study, a tiny USB drive in my hand, initiating the download of the final batch of Asterion files from his computer. The progress bar crept agonizingly slowly. Headlights swept across the room. His car. Panic seized me. I yanked the drive, triggering a computer error chime. I fumbled to close Windows, wiping the drive log as Samuel had instructed. My hands were slick with sweat. I was at the doorway when I heard his key turn in the lock. I melted into the hallway shadows as he entered, humming, the scent of cigar smoke and scotch clinging to him. He proceeded directly to the study. Holding my breath, I pressed myself against the wall. I heard the click of his mouse, a prolonged silence, then the soft creak of his chair. He appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the light. "Harper, what are you doing up?" "Couldn't sleep," I whispered, praying my voice sounded frail. "Getting water." He took a step closer, his eyes scrutinizing my face. For a heart-stopping moment, I was certain he knew that he could detect the digital scent of my trespass. His gaze lingered, calculating, suspicious. Then he smiled, a thin, cold stretching of his lips. "Get your rest, darling. Big day tomorrow. Bermuda awaits." He turned back to the study and quietly closed the door. The distinct click of the lock engaging was the period at the end of the sentence. He sensed something was amiss. The hunt was on, and the prey was alert. Back in my room, I clutched the USB drive, still warm. On it lay the proof. The financial trails, the art appraiser's kickback agreement, the psychological reports. It was a start, but as I stared at the locked door down the hall, I knew it might not be enough. He possessed the law, precedent, and the system on his side. I had a USB drive, a paranoid private investigator, and a fury that was steadily solidifying into ice. Bermuda was not a second honeymoon. It was a battleground, and I was finally outfitted for war. Bermuda offered a beautiful cage, turquoise waters, pink sands, and a villa with infinity views that seemed to perch on the edge of the world. Alex exuded sun-bleached charm, mixing rum swizzles, his hand a constant, possessive weight on the small of my back. The paperwork remained on a sleek leather portfolio on the teak dining table, an unspoken guest at every meal. "We should just get it done, sweetheart," he murmured on the second morning, his voice a lazy drawl as he massaged my shoulders. "Then we can truly relax, put all the business behind us." His thumbs pressed into a knot of tension, feeling less like a caress and more like an interrogation. I widened my eyes, summoning tears, conjuring the ghost of my grief. "It just feels so final, signing things, like we're giving up on us." My voice trembled. He sighed, the patient put-upon husband. "It's not about us, Harper. It's about protecting what we have. The partnership amendments are just housekeeping, updating addresses, clarifying tax clauses, boring lawyer stuff." He kissed my temple. "For our future." I had seen the boring stuff. In an encrypted call the previous night, with Rachel and Samuel, we had dissected a copy Chloe had secretly photographed. Buried within the legalese was a single new clause. The managing partner may, in his sole discretion, deem any asset of the partnership to be underperforming or non-core, and may divest said asset for fair market value, with proceeds to be reinvested for the general benefit of the partnership. It was a carte blanche to sell anything: the Soutine, the Hamptons house, the townhouse itself, whenever he pleased. Fair market value would be determined by Felix Durant, his appraiser. My performance was worthy of an Oscar. I feigned hesitation. I procrastinated. I signed one innocuous page regarding registered agent addresses, my hand shaking convincingly. A tear fell on the signature line. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "It's just still so hard." Alex's jaw tightened, but he forced a sympathetic smile. "I know, my love. I know." He didn't push further that day. The portfolio remained, a dormant shark. That night, as he snored softly, lulled by sun and rum, I slipped from the bed. The villa was silent. I took the portfolio to the moonlit patio. Using my phone, I photographed every page. The flash, a tiny, defiant strobe in the tropical darkness. I sent them to Samuel, to Rachel. Then I carefully replaced it. The prodigal wife returns. We returned to a New York autumn. The chill in the air mirrored the new chill within our home. The performance was over. Alex stopped asking. He started telling. "I've scheduled Felix to reappraise the collection next week," he announced over a tense breakfast. "For the FLP's annual audit, Marcus is meeting the numbers." It was a lie. The FLP had no such annual audit requirement. It was the first step in declaring the Soutine underperforming. "Fine," I said, not looking up from the newspaper. A new flatness had entered my voice. The fear was still there, a constant hum, but it was now background noise to a thrumming, purposeful rage. He looked surprised, then pleased. He mistook surrender for defeat. The day of the appraisal, I was not at the gallery. Instead, I was in a van parked down the street, wired for sound with Samuel, listening. We heard Alex greet Felix Durant, a man with an unctuous, cultured voice. "The soutine is the priority," Alex's voice came through the receiver. Crisp and businesslike. "I need an evaluation that reflects its illiquidity. Its challenging subject matter significantly limits the buyer pool. Be conservative." "Understood, Alex," Felix replied. "A difficult piece to move in the current climate. 2.2 perhaps. Make it 2 even. Round numbers are more credible. And the Hockney Pool series, perhaps emphasize the fading in the blues. Sun damage. We want a holistic picture of a collection needing proactive management." Samuel caught my eye. His face was grim. "Recorded," he mouthed, tapping his equipment. We had him. Direct evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. But Rachel warned it wasn't enough. "It's a start, but it's his word against a shady appraisers. We need the nexus, the money, the pattern." We obtained it from an unexpected source. Guilt. Eleanor Fitz, Alex's former assistant, now a harried young mother in Queens, met me in a playground, her toddler shrieking on the swings. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "He made me do things," she whispered, her eyes darting. Backdate correspondence, alter calendar entries. He had a system, code names for the women. "You were A1. The confirmation of the folder's label was a physical blow. After Isabella, I quit, but I kept copies of everything. Emails, memos, transfer orders to Asterion. She pressed a small, encrypted hard drive into my hand. "He's a monster. I can't testify. I have a family, but you can use this." The drive was a treasure trove. It contained the operating manual Samuel had only glimpsed. It outlined the playbook: identify target, establish trust, propose prenup, isolate assets, apply pressure, initiate dissolution. It listed the network: the appraiser, Durant; the shrink, Thorne; the accountant, Marcus. It was a roadmap of my own destruction, penned in Alex's cold, efficient prose. "This is it," Rachel said, her eyes blazing as we reviewed it in her secure office. "This is fraud in the inducement. This invalidates the prenup, the FLP, everything. This shows he never intended a marriage. He intended a financial transaction." "We take it to the judge," I said. "Not yet," Rachel countered, a predatory smile on her lips. "We let him get comfortable. We let him file for divorce. We let him lay out his grand design in open court. And then," she said, "we pull the rug out so hard he forgets which way is up." Alex filed for divorce a week later, presenting a petition brimming with feigned regret and brazen entitlement. It cited irreconcilable differences, painting me as distant, emotionally withdrawn since the miscarriage. It humbly requested the court enforce the prenuptial and partnership agreements and award him his fair share of the marital estate, which his attached financial affidavit estimated at a cool $4.2 million, including half the value of my inheritance, now deemed marital assets due to joint stewardship. I was served at the gallery. I made a show of it: tears, a slammed door, a panicked call to Alex that went to voicemail. He was giving me the cold, legal shoulder. His lawyer informed mine that all communications must now be formal. Our first court hearing was a procedural formality. Judge Eleanor Fletcher, a woman with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency and a low tolerance for presided. Alex was impeccable in a navy suit. He played the part perfectly, the dignified, wounded professional, forced to take legal action to secure his rights. He spoke of our failed partnership with a sigh. When my turn came, Rachel stood. "Your Honor, my client is, of course, devastated by the dissolution of her marriage. She is prepared to abide by all valid agreements. However, we believe there are significant questions regarding the formation and execution of the key agreements in question, which may impact their enforceability. We request a standard discovery period to explore these issues. It was a bland, routine request. Alex's lawyer, a sleek shark named Covington, waved a dismissive hand. Fishing expedition, Your Honor. The agreements are clear. This is a delay tactic. Judge Fletcher peered at me over her glasses. I sat with my hands folded, wearing a simple black dress, the picture of sober distress. Discovery is standard, Mr. Covington, she said dryly, her gaze cutting. Your client is a lawyer. He knows the drill. 60 days. Use them wisely. As we left the courtroom, Alex brushed past me. He didn't look at me, but his voice, a low, venomous whisper meant only for my ear, seethed. You're only making this more expensive for yourself, Harper. You can't win. The house always wins. I didn't flinch. I kept walking, a small, cold smile touching my lips for the first time in months. He thought I was playing a desperate defense. He didn't know I was reading from a different rulebook entirely, one that ended with his own playbook entered as evidence. The game was in play, and for the first time I knew precisely what cards he held. He just didn't know I'd already dealt myself a new hand. Discovery was a war of attrition fought with paper cuts. Alex's team, led by the shark-like Covington, buried us in requests. Every email I'd ever sent about money, every receipt for the gallery, a decade of credit card statements, the full client list for the Howard Eye. It was a blizzard of paper designed to overwhelm, to bury any potential defense in a mountain of irrelevant data. Rachel's paralegals worked in shifts, a dedicated trench of young associates in a windowless room we called the bunker, sifting, scanning, logging. We responded in kind, but with a scalpel, not a shovel. Our requests were surgical, precise, and designed to look like flailing. We asked for Alex's communications with Felix Durant regarding asset valuation. We requested his calendar entries for the days of my miscarriage. We asked for the client list of Asterion Holdings LLC. Covington objected to most, calling them overbroad, harassing, and irrelevant. The dance was tedious, necessary. We were laying a trail of breadcrumbs, making our eventual reveal seem like a brilliant, lucky find, not a premeditated ambush. Meanwhile, Samuel Rossi was operating in the shadows, and his world was not one of subpoenas and objections. He tracked the human network. He found Felix Durant, the appraiser, living beyond his means in a Westchester McMansion, with a gambling habit funded by wire transfers from a Cayman account Samuel was certain led back to Asterion. He found Dr. Eris Thorne, the psychologist, whose independent evaluations for the court were boilerplate diagnoses, tweaked only for the name at the top, all billed to Sterling Shaw's expert witness retainer. They're not just experts, Samuel growled, handing me grainy surveillance photos of Durant at a high-stakes poker game in Atlantic City. They're employees, on a secret payroll. The whole system is rigged. But the linchpin, the piece that would connect Alex's cold intellect to the raw, ugly mechanics of his scheme, was the operating manual from Eleanor Fitz. It was written in a detached, almost clinical tone, but its contents were monstrous. Under a section titled Asset Sublimation, it read, Goal: transform target's emotional attachment to inherited premarital assets into a liability. Frame sentiment as financial illiteracy. Use life events, death, pregnancy loss, to promote pragmatic consolidation. The key is to make the target believe divestment is their idea, for a greater good, future family, charitable legacy. Always position self as the responsible steward, saving them from their own weakness. I read it in Rachel's office, the words swimming on the page. It was a dissection of my grief, my hope, my love for my parents, all reduced to exploitable variables. The night of my miscarriage, he hadn't been comforting a wife. He'd been executing Step 7, leverage trauma for concessions. "We have to get this in front of a judge," I said, my voice hollow. "We will," Rachel assured me, her eyes hard. "But we need context. We need to show this wasn't a one-off. We need the other women." That was the hardest part. Samuel had names, but fear is a powerful silencer. The first woman I contacted, a former fashion editor named Meredith, hung up the moment I said Alex's name. The second, a soft-spoken philanthropist named Carol, met me in a public garden, her eyes darting nervously. "He took everything," she whispered, "and he made me look like a hysterical fool in the process. I can't. I signed an NDA as part of the settlement. If I talk, he'll sue me for everything I have left, which is nothing. I'm sorry." The door kept slamming shut. Their trauma was too fresh, their fear of Alex's legal retaliation too absolute. Without their testimony, the manual was just a strange, creepy document. Alex could claim it was theoretical, academic, a lawyer's musings. It was Isabella Vandergroot who finally broke the dam. I found her at a small, obscure art opening in Chelsea, looking even more brittle than before. She didn't run this time. She just looked at me with those sad, knowing eyes and said, "You're still fighting." "I'm trying," I said, "but I can't do it alone. He silenced everyone else." She stared at a violent splatter painting on the wall, her reflection distorted in the glossy paint. "He didn't just take my money, Harper. He took my reputation, my friends, my confidence. He had that psychologist tell the court I was a compulsive spender with narcissistic fantasies because I renovated the Sagaponack kitchen. The judge believed him. Everyone believed him." She turned to me, a spark of the old, fiery heiress igniting in her gaze. "What do you need?" "I need you to talk to my lawyer. Just tell the truth. About the script, the pressure, the psychologist." Isabella was silent for a long minute, then nodded, sharp and decisive. "Okay, but not for you. For the next one, and the one after that. To make it stop." Isabella's courage was contagious. With her on board, Samuel, using a blend of street-smart persuasion and vague hints of immunity for cooperating witnesses, managed to get a statement from Carol. Then Meredith, from a safe distance and through her lawyer, provided a written affidavit confirming the pattern. The whirlwind romance, the prenup signed under romantic pressure, the gradual takeover of her family's real estate portfolio. We were building a mosaic. Each woman was a tile, a piece of a picture that showed a predator, not a husband. The trap was sprung as the discovery period drew to a close. Alex's confidence swelled, his legal maneuvers growing more aggressive. Covington filed a motion to compel me to sit for a deposition with Dr. Thorne, his psychologist, for a custody evaluation of potential mental health factors affecting the marital estate. It was a naked attempt to inject Thorne's diagnosis into the record, to paint me as unstable. Rachel fought it furiously, but Judge Fletcher, playing it by the book, allowed a limited deposition. "But it will be recorded, and my clerk will be present," she ruled, "and the scope will be strictly limited to the petitioner's claim of emotional distress impacting the marriage. This is not a free-ranging psychological examination." The deposition was set for a bland office building in Midtown. I walked in with Rachel, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. Dr. Thorne was a small, neat man with watery eyes and a soothing, monotonous voice. He asked gentle, probing questions about my parents' death, the miscarriage, my state of mind during the marriage. He was good. He was building a portrait of a fragile, grieving woman prone to poor decisions. Then, near the end, he asked, "Mrs. Sterling Howard, would you say you have a tendency to let emotion override financial prudence? To cling to objects for sentimental reasons against wiser counsel?" It was the hook, the setup for the histrionic financial impulsivity diagnosis. Before I could answer, Rachel held up a hand. Objection. Compound. Assumes facts not in evidence and calls for a conclusion. But go ahead, Harper. You can answer. I looked directly at Dr. Thorne, letting him see the ice in my eyes, not the fragility he expected. I would say, Doctor, that I've learned to be very careful about whose counsel I consider wise, especially when that counsel is being paid by my husband to reach a predetermined conclusion. Thorne's eyelids flickered, a tiny, almost imperceptible tick. I'm not sure I follow. I think you do, I said softly. I nodded to Rachel. Rachel opened her briefcase and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a bank statement, highlighted. A monthly deposit of $15,000 from Asterion Holdings Consulting LLC to an account in Thorne's name for the past 3 years. The description read, Professional Services Retainer. Thorne's face went the color of old paper. The soothing monotone vanished. This is a standard expert witness retainer. It proves nothing. It proves you're on his payroll, Doctor, Rachel said sweetly, while purporting to be an independent evaluator for the court. That's not just a conflict of interest. In some circles, that's called fraud. Would you like to revise any of your previous testimony? The deposition ended minutes later. Thorne refused to answer further questions, citing his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. As we left, Rachel was practically vibrating with triumph. We just got him as our star witness, and we have him dead to rights on a paid bias. Fletcher will eat him alive. But Alex wasn't finished. A week later, a notice came. He was exercising his right as managing partner of the FLP to divest a non-core, underperforming asset for the benefit of the partnership. The asset was the Soutine. The buyer was a private European collector represented by Felix Durant. The sale price was $2 million, a fraction of its true value. It was a brazen power play, a test. He was showing me he could reach into the heart of my inheritance and pluck it out legally with the documents I'd signed. The message was clear. The cage is locked. Stop fighting. I met with Rachel and Samuel in crisis mode. We have to file for an injunction, I said. We have to stop the sale. We will, Rachel said. But the hearing will be in 2 days. We need to lay out our full case. The manual, the women, Thorne, Durant, the whole rotten system. We're going to have to show our hand. Is it enough? I asked, the old fear creeping back in. What if the judge thinks it's just bitter divorce theatrics? Samuel, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. We need the kill shot. The thing that connects the money directly to the intent. The thing that proves this wasn't just a dirty divorce. It was a criminal enterprise from day one. He leaned forward, his meaty hands flat on the table. The assistant, Eleanor. She gave us the playbook, but she said she kept copies of everything. Bank transfers. I've been tracing the Asterion money. It's a shell game. But there's one payout that's different. A big one. 2 years ago to a numbered account in Switzerland, right after he wrapped up the Vandergroot case. I can't crack the Swiss account, but if Eleanor has the transfer order with his signature specifying what that payment was for, then it's not just money flowing into his LLC. Rachel finished, her eyes alight. It's evidence of profit sharing from a fraud, conspiracy, RICO territory. I called Eleanor. She was terrified. I gave you what I had. The Swiss transfer. Eleanor. 2 years ago. July. From Asterion. Do you have the wire instruction? A long silence. Then a whisper. Yes. He made me file it. It was a bonus, he said, for Project Veritas. The Latin word for truth. His password. His sick joke. I need it, Eleanor, please. It's the only way to make it stop for everyone. She was crying softly. The usual drop was a locker in Penn Station. That night, Samuel retrieved a small, unmarked envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a wire transfer authorization from Asterion Holdings to a Zurich account. In the memo field in Alex's handwriting was one word: commission. The amount was exactly 20% of the settlement he'd secured from Isabella Vandergroot. It was the smoking gun, proof that he wasn't just a lawyer winning big settlements. He was a partner in a scheme, taking a direct cut of the loot. The divorce wasn't the end of his plan, it was the profit-taking event. Rachel studied the document, a slow, fierce smile spreading across her face. "Well, Harper," she said, "I do believe we finally have his attention." The injunction hearing was no longer about a painting. It was about to become the opening argument in the case of the People versus Alexander Sterling, and I was no longer just the victim. I was the star witness for the prosecution. The air in the New York County Supreme Court, Part 23, was thick with the smell of lemon polish, old books, and slow-burning tension. The gallery was fuller than it had been for any previous hearing. Word in the incestuous world of high-stakes divorce and legal gossip had slithered out. Something explosive was about to happen in the Sterling Howard case. Reporters from the Post and Page 6 lurked in the back rows. A few curious colleagues of Alex's sat with carefully neutral expressions in the front row. Separated by the aisle, like rival factions at a wedding, sat my small battalion: Chloe, a fierce black-clad sentinel, and Samuel Rossi, looking profoundly out of place in a suit that seemed to pain him. On Alex's side, a row of sleek, autonomous associates from Sterling Shaw. At the plaintiff's table, Alexander Sterling was a masterpiece of calm assurance. He looked like the cover of New York Lawyer magazine, the perfect charcoal suit, the sapphire cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. His posture was relaxed but alert. He occasionally leaned over to whisper something to Covington, who would nod, a sleek predator ready to feed. They were playing the long game, confident the board was set in their favor. At the defendant's table, I sat with Rachel Goldstein. We presented a study in contrast. I wore a simple, elegant, cream-colored sheath dress and a single strand of pearls, the picture of understated, wounded dignity. Rachel, in a sharp crimson suit that seemed to dare the somber room, was a coiled spring of contained energy. Before us, laid out with military precision in labeled binders, was our arsenal. The Honorable Eleanor Fletcher entered, her black robe swirling. She was a woman in her late 60s with a cap of steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every shade of human mendacity. She surveyed the crowded room with a hint of irritation, as if we were all trespassing on her personal library. "We're here on petitioner's motion for a temporary injunction to halt the sale of a specific asset held within a family-limited partnership," she began, her voice dry and efficient. "Mr. Covington, this is your motion. Make it quick." Covington rose, oozing condescending charm. "Thank you, Your Honor. It's really quite simple. The Howard Family Legacy Partnership Agreement, duly signed by both parties, grants my client, as managing partner, the clear and unambiguous authority to divest non-core assets for the benefit of the partnership. The painting in question, a challenging and, frankly, illiquid soutine, has been deemed such an asset. A bona fide offer at fair market value has been obtained. The respondent's sudden objection is pure sentimentality, an attempt to undermine a legally binding agreement. We ask the court to deny any injunction and allow the partnership to operate as intended." He sat down, the picture of a man who just explained that the sky was blue. Judge Fletcher turned to us. "Ms. Goldstein, sentimentality isn't a valid legal objection. What's your basis?" Rachel stood, smoothing her jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. We agree this is about the validity of an agreement, but not its wording, its formation. We are not here today simply to stop the sale of a painting. We are here to demonstrate that the family limited partnership, the prenuptial agreement, and indeed the entire financial architecture of this marriage were built on a foundation of fraud, concealment, and predatory intent. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Covington snorted audibly. "Objection, Your Honor. Grandstanding and irrelevant. Let's hear her basis." "Mr. Covington," Judge Fletcher said, her interest palpably piqued. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her steepled fingers. "Proceed, counselor, but tread carefully." "The basis, Your Honor," Rachel said, her voice ringing clear in the quiet room, "is a pattern of racketeering activity designed to systematically loot the separate assets of vulnerable, wealthy women. My client was not Alexander Sterling's wife. She was his mark. And today, with the court's permission, I will introduce evidence proving that this divorce is not the dissolution of a marriage, but the attempted culmination of a criminal scheme." The room was utterly silent. Alex's smile had frozen on his face. Covington was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. A scandalous, defamatory fiction. There is no evidence." "We have evidence, Your Honor," Rachel interjected calmly. "We would like to enter our first exhibit, a document recovered from the petitioner's own files, which we have titled Patterns of Asset Acquisition and Sublimation." She handed a copy to the clerk, who brought it to the judge, and one to Covington. Covington glanced at it, and his face, for the first time, lost its smug polish. He looked at Alex, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Alex's own composure cracked. He stared at the document as if it were a ghost. Judge Fletcher read in silence for a full minute. The only sound was the rustle of paper. Her expression was unreadable. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Sterling, do you recognize this document?" Alex cleared his throat. It appears to be some personal notes, theoretical musings, from law school perhaps. They've been taken entirely out of context. They're dated from 2 years ago, well after law school," Rachel said smoothly, "and the context is provided by the women named within it. We call Isabella Vandergroot to the stand." The murmur became a buzz. Isabella, her head held high but her hands trembling slightly, walked from the back of the room. She was sworn in. Under Rachel's gentle questioning, she told her story: the whirlwind courtship, the prenup signed on a romantic trip to Napa, the gradual suggestions about her disorganized trust, the pressure to sell a valuable property portfolio to fund a joint venture, the sudden cold divorce filing, and the psychological evaluation that painted her as unstable. "And the psychologist's name?" Rachel asked. "Dr. Eros Thorne," Isabella said, the name dropping like a stone. "And were you ever diagnosed as a compulsive spender with narcissistic fantasies prior to your divorce?" "No," Isabella said, her voice gaining strength. "I was on the boards of the Guggenheim and the Met. I had a PhD in art history. He made me sound like a madwoman with a credit card." Covington's cross-examination was aggressive, trying to paint her as a bitter ex who mismanaged her own fortune. But Isabella held firm. "He didn't just take my money, counselor. He took my voice. He used the law to make my truth sound like a lie. Until today." Rachel then entered the bank records showing the monthly payments from Asterion to Dr. Thorne. She entered the surveillance photos of Felix Durant at the high-stakes poker game, alongside his inflated mortgage documents. She called Carol, then Meredith via affidavit, each echoing the same pattern with chilling similarity: the targeted pursuit, the protective prenup, the financial isolation, the corrupted experts. With each piece of evidence, Alex seemed to shrink slightly in his chair. His aura of invincibility was leaching away, replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. This wasn't a skirmish over a painting. It was a full-scale invasion of his entire clandestine empire. Covington objected repeatedly, shouting hearsay, relevance, prejudice. Judge Fletcher overruled him more often than not, her gaze growing colder and more focused with each exhibit. "I'm allowing a wide latitude, counselor," she told Covington icily, "because your client has put the validity of his financial intentions directly at issue. This goes to state of mind and pattern of conduct. Then Rachel played the audio. The clear, crisp recording from the van of Alex directing Felix Durant to lowball the Soutine appraisal. Make it too even. Round numbers are more credible. Alex's face went ashen. He looked at Covington with pure, undiluted fury, as if his lawyer should have been able to prevent the very air from carrying sound. "This is illegal wiretapping," Covington roared. "The recording was made from a public street of a conversation in a room with the windows open regarding a conspiracy to commit fraud," Rachel countered. "No expectation of privacy applies. Your Honor?" Judge Fletcher simply said, "The recording is admitted." "Continue, Ms. Goldstein." The atmosphere in the courtroom was now electric. The reporters were scribbling furiously. The gallery leaned forward as one. Rachel paused, letting the tension build to an almost unbearable pitch. She walked back to our table and picked up a single sheet of paper, holding it as if it were a delicate parchment. "Your Honor, we have entered evidence of a pattern. We have entered evidence of method. We have entered evidence of corrupted agents. What we will enter now is evidence of profit, of the financial engine that made this predatory enterprise worthwhile." She handed the wire transfer authorization to the clerk. "This, Your Honor, is a transfer of funds from Asterion Holdings, an LLC solely controlled by Mr. Sterling, to a numbered Swiss bank account." A line on the memo, handwritten by Mr. Sterling, read, "Commission." She turned to the room. "The amount of this commission is $1.8 million. It was executed 2 years ago, exactly 1 week after the Vandergroot divorce settlement was finalized. Vandergroot received $9 million in assets as a result of Mr. Sterling's settlement, primarily from Ms. Vandergroot's estate." The math hung in the air, simple and devastating. 20%. A sound escaped Alex, a choked guttural gasp. He was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. All color had drained from his face. Covington looked at the document, then at his client, and for the first time, the slick lawyer appeared utterly, hopelessly lost. "This document," Rachel said, her voice dropping to a conversational tone that nonetheless carried to every corner of the silent room, "connects the money directly to the motive. It proves that Alexander Sterling was not merely a zealous advocate for his clients. He was a profit-sharing partner in the looting of their wives' estates. The prenuptial agreement he had my client sign, the family limited partnership he pressured her into. These were not instruments of protection. They were the specific tools selected for this specific mark, as outlined in his playbook, to be leveraged by his paid experts, for which he would receive a direct commission upon success. The attempted sale of the Soutine is not a partnership decision. It is the cashing of a check he wrote the day he met Harper Howard." "Your Honor!" Covington was shouting, desperate. This is beyond the scope. This is a fishing expedition that has somehow dredged up irrelevant, unauthenticated. We move to strike all of it." Judge Fletcher ignored him. She was staring at the wire transfer, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. She looked at Alex. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "would you care to explain this commission?" Alex stood up. He was breathing heavily. The polished facade was gone, shattered. In its place was a cornered animal, arrogant and vicious. "This is a witch hunt. That document is a forgery. This is what she does. She's paranoid. She's vengeful. She's fabricating this entire grotesque fantasy because she can't accept that I'm leaving her." It was the worst possible thing he could have said. It was the script from the playbook. Page 1, discredit target. Judge Fletcher's eyes narrowed. "Are you denying this is your handwriting, Mr. Sterling?" "I'm denying everything," he spat, his voice rising to a shout. "This whole circus is a lie. She's a bitter, hysterical woman who's trying to steal my rightful share of her family's money by painting me as some monster." "Your Honor," Rachel said, not raising her voice. "We have a handwriting expert on standby, but perhaps a more direct method, given the petitioner's testimony. I request that he be called to the stand under oath to explain these discrepancies." Covington practically leapt up. "Absolutely not. This is a blatant attempt to harass my client. The petitioner has put his intent and credibility directly at issue," Judge Fletcher said, her gaze like granite. "And he has just accused the respondent of fabricating evidence in a court of law. He will take the stand. Now." The moment hung, suspended. Alex looked at Covington, who gave a minute, helpless shake of his head. This was not in the playbook. There was no precedent for the prey summoning the hunter to the witness stand. Alex straightened his tie, a hollow gesture. He walked to the stand, sworn in, and sat. For a moment he tried to reassemble the mask, but the cracks were too wide. Rachel began gently, almost politely. "Mr. Sterling, you described the document, Patterns of Asset Acquisition, as theoretical musings. Can you explain the theoretical purpose of a section titled Leverage Trauma for Concessions?" "It's in tactics," Alex said, his voice tight. "Tactics you employed with Isabella Vandergroot following her mother's death." "Correct. Urging her to sell the family home while she was grieving. I advised my client. That's my job. And the monthly payments from your company, Asterion, to Dr. Thorne, were those for academic services?" "He was a consultant who provided psychological evaluations for your divorce cases, evaluations that consistently pathologized the wealthy wife." "Objection," Covington yelled. "Sustained. Move on, Ms. Goldstein." Rachel picked up the wire transfer. "This commission, $1.8 million. For what services exactly did Asterion Holding pay this commission?" Alex's jaw clenched. "Asterion is an investment vehicle. It makes multiple investments into a numbered Swiss account." "Investments in what? And why is it called a commission?" "I don't remember the details of this one transaction. You don't remember the payment of $1.8 million you authorized. The memorandum in your own hand." The pressure in the room was palpable. The walls Alex had carefully constructed were crumbling under the weight of his own evidence. I saw it in his eyes the moment his calculations switched from protection to damage control. The arrogance returned, but now it was naked, toxic. "Fine," he snapped, the word exploding in the quiet court. "You want the truth? Isabella Vandergroot was a spoiled, incompetent child who would have blown through that fortune in 5 years. I saved it. I created value from her sentimental clutter. I provided a service, and I was compensated for my expertise, for my vision, something a dilettante gallery owner with a trust fund would never understand." He was glaring at me now, his finger pointing across the room. "She thinks art is about feeling. It's not. It's about value. And I am the ultimate appraiser. I saw the value in her, the potential return, and I cultivated it. That's not a crime. That's genius." The silence that followed was absolute, profound. Even the reporters had stopped writing. Alex's words hung in the air, a stunning, unforced confession. He had, under the mildest pressure, articulated the entire monstrous thesis of his scheme and claimed it as a virtue. Rachel let the silence stretch until it became a verdict in itself. Then she said softly, "No further questions." Covington, in a state of near catatonic shock, had no redirect. He simply whispered, "The petitioner rests." Judge Fletcher did not look at Alex. She looked at the pile of evidence before her. She looked at me, sitting calmly at my table. Then she looked at the ceiling for a long moment, as if seeking divine patience. When she looked back down, her voice was flat, final, and carried a weight of judicial wrath I had never heard before. "What has been presented to this court today," she began, "transcends a marital dispute. It outlines what appears to be a predatory enterprise operating under the color of law to systematically defraud individuals through the manipulation of matrimony. The evidence of fraud in the inducement of the prenuptial and partnership agreements is overwhelming. The attempt to sell the Soutine painting is not only enjoined, it is void, as is the FLP agreement itself. She turned her gaze to Alex, who had shrunk back into the witness chair, the enormity of his outburst finally dawning on him. "Mr. Sterling, your conduct is an affront to this court and to the practice of law. The evidence of conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, and potential racketeering is so compelling that I have a duty that extends beyond this courtroom." She picked up her gavel, not to strike it, but to point it at him. Like the finger of fate, this matter is referred immediately and in its entirety to the New York County District Attorney's Office and the New York State Grievance Committee for the First Judicial Department. Pending those investigations, all marital assets are frozen, the divorce proceedings are stayed, and as for you, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice dropping to a terrible, icy whisper, I suggest you secure counsel of a different variety. You're going to need a criminal defense attorney. She brought the gavel down with a sharp crack. This hearing is adjourned. Chaos erupted. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Cameras flashed. Covington was trying to shepherd a shell-shocked Alex to a side door, but court officers were already moving to intercept him, not for arrest, but to ensure he was served with a mountain of new orders. Through the tumult, Alex's eyes found mine one last time. The hatred was there, white-hot and desperate, but beneath it was something new, raw, animal fear. The hunter was in the trap, and the door had just slammed shut. I didn't smile. I didn't weep. I simply gathered my things, my hand steady. Rachel placed a hand on my arm, her face alight with fierce triumph. Chloe was at my side in an instant, pulling me into a crushing hug. Samuel gave me a gruff, solemn nod from across the aisle. The legal game was over. Alexander Sterling had lost, but as I walked out of the courtroom, the cacophony of the crumbling empire at my back, I knew the war wasn't won. The battle for the truth was over. The battle for survival against the legal fallout, the scandal, the sheer wreckage of my life was just beginning. The fallout was immediate and seismic. The New York Post's next day headline was a work of tabloid art, divorce lawyer's prenup predicament, taped plot to swindle heiress wife. Page 6 ran a breathless, detailed account of the courtroom confession. The New York Law Journal had a more sober but damning front-page analysis. Sterling case raises specter of systemic fraud in high-stakes matrimonial law. My townhouse, which had felt like a gilded cage, became a different kind of prison, one besieged by press. Cameras camped at the end of the block. I kept the blinds drawn. Chloe moved in as a combination of bodyguard, confidant, and chief strategist. Samuel Rossi, now on a first-name basis with the doorman, came and went, a steady, grim presence bringing updates from the now official investigations. The district attorney's office, led by a razor-sharp, ambitious prosecutor named Anya Sharma, moved with startling speed. Judge Fletcher's referral and the mountain of evidence Rachel had assembled were a prosecutor's dream, a pre-wrapped indictment. The New York State Grievance Committee suspended Alex's law license pending the outcome of the criminal case, a death knell for his practice. Sterling Shaw, in a desperate act of self-preservation, announced his expulsion from the firm and initiated its own internal review, a hollow gesture that fooled no one. Alex was arrested on a chilly Tuesday morning, 11 days after the hearing. The charges were read on the courthouse steps: 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 5 counts of wire fraud, 1 for each of the identified former marks, including me, 1 count of grand larceny in the first degree, and 2 counts of criminal solicitation for the subordination of Felix Durant and Dr. Eris Thorne. The handcuffs, flashing silver in the camera lights as he was led into a waiting sedan, were the most satisfying image I'd ever seen. I watched it on CNN, sipping cold coffee. I felt no euphoria, only a deep, weary sense of relief, as if a constant deafening noise had finally stopped. The monster was named, caged, and his playbook was public. The world knew, but the silence that followed was filled with the echoes of what he'd done and the colossal mess he'd left behind. Untangling the FLP and unfreezing your assets will be a bureaucratic nightmare, but it's a winnable war, Rachel said, spreading files across my dining table, which had become our war room. The DA's case makes the fraud clear. We'll file motions to have all transfers to the FLP voided ab initio from the start. The prenup is already dead, but the house, the art, the accounts, it's all tangled with his management. It will take months, maybe a year. And the other women? I asked. Sharma is talking to them. Isabella is a star witness. Carol and Meredith are cooperating. They're seeking restitution as victims in the criminal case, which could be faster than civil suits. She gave me a direct look. You could sue him civilly, too, for intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud. You'd win, but it would be ugly, public, and you'd likely be collecting from a man headed to prison with all his assets seized. I shook my head. I don't want his money. I never did. I just want mine back. All of it. And I want him to not be able to do this to anyone, ever again. The prison sentence will see to that, Samuel grunted from the doorway. Sharma's talking RICO enhancements. He's looking at 25 to life if they nail him on the pattern. Durant and Thorne are singing like canaries, trying to cut deals. They're giving up everything. The kickbacks, the fake reports, the whole pipeline. It was justice, of a sort, but it felt distant, legal, happening in courtrooms and plea negotiations. My personal justice was slower, quieter. It was the soutine, back on my dining room wall, its grotesque glory a daily reminder of what I'd almost lost. It was the deed to the Hamptons house, arriving in the mail after a judge granted our emergency motion, my name alone on the title once more. It was the first statement from my newly restored and solely controlled investment account, the numbers a comforting abstraction of safety. Yet, the townhouse felt haunted. Every room held a memory of his performance. The breakfast nook where he'd first suggested the joint account, the study with its now emptied locked door, the bedroom. I started sleeping in the guest room. 6 weeks after his arrest, a letter arrived, forwarded by Rachel. It was on the letterhead of Covington Vale, but the signature was Alex's, shaky and unfamiliar. Harper, I am instructed to extend an offer, a global resolution. I will agree to a divorce on your terms, with a waiver of all claims to any asset premarital or otherwise. I will sign any and all documents necessary to reverse the FLP transfers and relinquish any managerial rights. Alexander's letter arrived in a stiff envelope bearing the esteemed letterhead of Covington Vale. The signature, penned in a shaky, unfamiliar hand, was Alex's. Harper, I am instructed to extend an offer, a global resolution. I will agree to a divorce on your terms, with a waiver of all claims to any asset premarital or otherwise. I will sign any and all documents necessary to reverse the FLP transfers and relinquish any managerial rights. I will also provide a full, sworn financial disclosure and assist in the repatriation of any assets. In return, you will provide a written statement to the district attorney and the grievance committee attesting that you believe our marriage, while flawed, was entered into in good faith on my part, and that you do not support the criminal charges, which you now see as a misunderstanding fueled by the bitterness of the divorce. You will also refrain from giving any victim impact statement or cooperating further with the prosecution. This is the cleanest, fastest way for you to regain control of your life and your legacy. Dragging this through criminal court will take years and keep you in the spotlight as a victim. This ends it now. Think of your privacy, your gallery, your future. I am prepared to be generous in the divorce settlement to facilitate this. I await your response. Alexander, I read it twice, then handed it to Chloe, who was pacing nearby. She skimmed it and let out a bark of laughter that held no humor. The arrogance, the breathtaking, unfathomable arrogance. He's offering to give you back what he stole in exchange for you perjuring yourself to save him from prison, and he calls it being generous. He's terrified, Rachel said, tapping the letter. Sharma's case is airtight. His associates are flipping. This is a Hail Mary. He's trying to use your desire for peace as a lifeline. I thought about it, about the allure of a clean break, of his face disappearing from the newspapers, of the constant legal dread vanishing, but then I thought of Isabella, living in a condo in White Plains, her spirit broken. I thought of Carol, jumping at shadows. I thought of the due diligence folder, dated before he ever loved me. I thought of the Lola receipt and the miscarriage and the cold calculation in his eyes when he called the Soutine an underperforming asset. I walked to the fireplace, where a small, cheerful blaze was taking the edge off the autumn chill. I held the corner of the letter to the flame. It caught, curling black at the edges, the crisp paper turning to fragile, glowing lace. I dropped it into the grate and watched Alexander Sterling's last desperate deal burn to ash. My response, I said to Rachel, my voice calm, is no. Tell the DA I'll testify. Tell them I'll give a victim impact statement. Tell them I'll do whatever it takes. Alex did not go to trial. Facing the testimony of his former wife, his former assistant, 3 of his former victims, and 2 co-conspirators with detailed records, his lawyer, a new, high-priced criminal defense attorney, negotiated a plea bargain 2 days before jury selection was to begin. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, covering the entire scheme, 3 counts of wire fraud for Isabella, Carol, and myself, and 1 count of grand larceny in the 2nd degree. In exchange, the other charges were dropped, and Anya Sharma agreed not to seek the maximum sentence under RICO, though she made no promises. The sentencing hearing was in a different courtroom, larger, colder. I sat in the front row, flanked by Chloe and Rachel. Isabella sat behind me, a solid, silent presence. The air smelled of old wood and dread. Alex stood before the judge, diminished. His suit was expensive, but hung on him. He'd lost weight. The arrogant gleam was gone from his eyes, replaced by a hollow, defeated sheen. He was asked if he had anything to say. He turned, not to the judge, but to look at me. His eyes held a plea, a last pathetic attempt at the old connection. Harper, I am sorry for the pain. I got lost. The ambition, the game, it consumed me. I never meant for you to get hurt the way you did. It was a non-apology, an apology for my pain, not for his actions. An apology that framed his crimes as a personal failing, a loss of his way, not a coldly executed business plan. Then it was my turn. I stood and walked to the lectern. I didn't have notes. I looked at the judge, then at Alex, holding his gaze until he looked away. Your Honor, I began, my voice clear in the silent room. Alexander Sterling didn't get lost. He knew exactly where he was going. He had a map, and I was just a destination on it. He didn't mean for me to get hurt. My hurt was the intended byproduct, the necessary cost of doing business. He weaponized my love, my grief, and my trust. He used the law, a system meant to protect people, as a hunting rifle. He is not sorry for what he did. He is only sorry he was caught. I took a breath, feeling the eyes of the room on me. The damage is not just financial. It is the theft of safety, the theft of the ability to trust your own judgment. He asked me, in a letter, to call this all a misunderstanding so I could have peace, but there is no peace in a lie. The only peace I will find, and the only justice that matters for the other women in this room, is in knowing he can never do this again, that the system he corrupted has finally corrected itself. I ask that you sentence him accordingly, to protect the next woman who might have been a 6 on his list. I sat down. My hands were trembling, but my soul was still. The judge, a stern man with a reputation for harsh sentences for white-collar crime, was unmoved by Alex's statement. He cited the calculated, predatory, and protracted nature of the scheme, the egregious breach of fiduciary duty as an attorney, and the profound psychological harm to multiple victims. He then sentenced Alexander Sterling to 18 to 25 years in a state correctional facility, with a recommendation for no early parole. He was remanded into custody immediately. As the court officers led him away, he didn't look back. The final image was of his once proud shoulders slumped, being ushered to a side door, out of my life, forever. A year later, on a bright, crisp Saturday in October, I stood on the deck of the Hamptons Beach House, the one my parents had loved. The Atlantic roared its steady song, and the late-season light gilded the dunes. The house was no longer a potential asset in a partnership. It was just home. The gallery, the Howard Plenum, was thriving. The notoriety of the case had, perversely, brought a new kind of clientele. Women, mostly, who came not just for the art, but for a glimpse of the woman who'd outmaneuvered a master manipulator. I'd channeled that energy. The current show was titled Tangible Assets, featuring female artists exploring inheritance, value, and the things we cling to that can't be appraised. Chloe was there, of course, mixing a mean pitcher of margaritas. Isabella Vandergroot was there, too. Her laugh easier now, the brittle edge softened. We'd become an unlikely trio, bound by a shared trauma and a mutual determination to forge something from the wreckage. To the Howard family legacy, Chloe said, raising her glass, finally under the control of the right Howard. We clinked glasses, the salt air mixed with the taste of lime and tequila. I heard from Rachel, I said. The civil suits from Isabella, Carol, and Meredith were settled. The court ordered the seizure and liquidation of what's left of Alex's assets, the apartment, the investments, even the Brioni suits. The restitution fund won't make them whole, but it's something. It's justice, Isabella said, with a firm nod. It's acknowledgement. I looked out at the horizon. The legal battles were over. The finances were secure, more carefully guarded than ever by a fiercely protective Michael Rossi, who had finally admitted, over a celebratory scotch, that I wasn't entirely hopeless. The ghost in the townhouse had been exorcised. I'd sold it and bought a sun-filled loft in Tribeca, where the only history on the walls was the art I chose to put there. But the work wasn't done. With a portion of the funds recovered from the FLP reversal, I had established something new, the Veritas Project, a nonprofit that provided legal, financial, and psychological resources to people, mostly women, who suspected they were being financially abused or manipulated in a relationship. We had a hotline, a network of vetted attorneys, like Rachel, and forensic accountants, like Michael, and support groups. The name was my own private joke, a reclamation, truth. To the next chapter, I said, lifting my glass again. Later, as the sun dipped towards the water, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold, I walked down to the water's edge alone. The cold foam swirled around my ankles. I thought of the terrifying claustrophobic feeling of the trap closing around me in that courtroom a lifetime ago, when Alex had laughed and promised to take everything. Some traps, I thought, are only effective if you don't see the mechanism. Once you understand the spring, the latch, the bait, the whole contraption becomes just a puzzle. And sometimes, The only way to solve the puzzle is to dismantle it from the outside and use the pieces to build something stronger, something that can't be so easily taken apart. The predator had seen me as a collection of assets to be acquired. He'd forgotten that the most valuable things, resilience, trust, a sense of self, are not listed on any balance sheet. They're the things you discover you have only when someone tries to steal them from you. I turned my back on the darkening ocean and walked up the beach towards the warm light of the house, towards the sound of my friends' laughter. The past was a closed book, its final sentence written in a judge's decree. The future was a blank canvas, and for the first time in years, I was the only one holding the brush.